It seems that the most common way to make neat side edges is to slip the first stitch and purl the last stitch of every row. This little trick creates a lovely chain of stitches at each side of the project. It looks great, but when we need to seam those slip stitch edges, we have to be careful about the type of seam that we use. Because every chain of the edging is created by 2 rows, the usual mattress stitch will form a fairly loose join. For years I've been using backstitch to join pieces with slip stitch edgings, but recently I stumbled upon another type of seam that is as reliable as backstitch, but forms a much flatter join that also looks very nice on the wrong side of the work. In this tutorial, I'll show you how it works. Before we start seaming, it's a good idea to block the pieces, or at least seam the edging and even out the stitches. This way it will be easier for us to see the slip stitch salvages when we seam the pieces. So when the pieces are blocked, or at least the edgings are blocked, place the pieces next to each other like this, and so that the right side of the work is facing to you. Then take a wool needle and thread a piece of yarn into the wool needle. The length of the yarn should be at least twice the length of the future seam. If you left one of the tails when you cast on, if you left a long tail, then you can easily use that tail. I'll be using a yarn in contrasting color to make it easier for you to see how the seam works, but of course in real life you would want to use the same yarn that you used to make the project. So first step would be to join the piece of yarn to the work. If you are using the tail, then you simply skip this step. But for me, I would need to join it. So how do we do that? You can do it any way you like, but I usually simply tie this yarn at the very bottom of the seam. So insert the wool needle from back to front into the very bottom of one of the pieces, and then from front to back and to the very bottom of the other piece. Leave a tail that is about 10 centimeters, about this big. You don't have to really measure it or anything, just big enough to weave it in later on. And then simply tie the tail and the yarn with the square knot or a simple knot, or like I said, you can use any other way to join the yarn to the work. I prefer to tie it, even though it creates a knot, because it is more secure, so I know that my seam won't fall apart from that side. Then move the yarn from the back to the front like this to keep the knot at the back of the work. And now we are ready to seam. We'll be going back and forth between the pieces, just like we do when we do the mattress stitch or pretty much any other seam. First, insert the tip of the needle into the first stitch from the bottom of the edge, and let's start with the piece at the right side. So we go from right to left, and we'll be using only one leg of the stitch. See, each stitch has 2 legs, and we'll be using only the one that is closer to the right side of the work. Only this one, these legs on this side, and these legs on the piece on the left side. So we go from right to left under the right leg of the first stitch from the bottom of the piece, like this. And then we go from left to right, again under just one leg. See, I'm not going through the fabric. That's very important. If we go through, then the seam would be much thicker, and basically it would be like mattress stitch, and it won't be as secure and as nice. So we go just under one leg, just the right leg of each stitch on this side, and then pull the yarn through. Then we do the same thing but in a mirror version. So we're going left to right under just one leg, and this time it's the left leg of this stitch, the one that is closer to the right side of the work. And then we go from right to left under the leg of the next stitch, like this, and pull the yarn through. Again, I want to show you how it looks from this angle, because I want you to understand that we are only going under one leg. So we're not going through the work, we're going just under one leg. And then pull the yarn really tight. And do it again. But this time we're gonna go, of course, not at the stitch that is at the bottom, because that stitch is already joined, but this time we are going into the stitch that was the last one at the previous step when we used this side of the work. So if you're not sure where this stitch is, simply pull the work a bit aside, and then you will see where the yarn comes from. So this is the stitch that we need. So it's the last worked stitch. We go again right to left here and left to right into the next stitch, and we always use just one leg of the stitch. We don't go through the fabric. And then pull the yarn through. And we do the same thing over here. Left to right into the last worked stitch. See, the yarn is coming from that stitch, so I'm going again. So we're basically working the same stitch twice. And then right to left into the next stitch. And just under one leg. I keep repeating this because it is important. And keep doing that, the same thing. Right to left, left to right, always using just one leg, pull the yarn through, and keep going until you join all the stitches, or until the seam is as long as you need if it's a partial seam for some reason. And pull the yarn through. Pull the yarn tight, but make sure it is not too tight so that it jams the fabric. So it should be tight, but it should keep the fabric flat. And then we do it again, and again, and again. Always using just the leg of the stitch that is closer to the right side of the work. And just a couple more times, here and there. Pull the yarn. And the last time, this one is not really a full stitch, so it's kind of half of a stitch, so I'm gonna still go in there. And over here. And here we go. So the seam is done. As you see, it is almost invisible. You can see it only when you stretch the fabric, but normally you won't do that. And once you block it, it will just stay the way it is. And it looks really nice on the wrong side. It is, first of all, it is much flatter. When you look at this angle, you will notice that it doesn't have that bulk at this side, at the wrong side of the work. It is quite flat, and it looks great. See, it has a nice kind of band of the chains of stitches with this lovely kind of chain at the middle. And because I'm using contrasting color yarn, then of course you can see what the yarn is, but if you're using the same color, it would look even better. So quite a nice seam. Let's now finish it off, and to do that, go from right to left into the last worked stitch at the piece of the right, and the last stitch of the piece on the left, and then simply join them with one seam. Again, it's optional. You can join it any other way, or if you decide not to join it, because the only thing that you see are those joins at the bottom and at the top, and you can avoid that by joining it in a different way, but I prefer to keep it secure. So I make that extra stitch, and I really don't much care that it is visible, because no one's gonna look at the very edge of your work, and most likely it will be hidden within another seam. So I'm not really picky about that, but if you want to make it perfect and fully invisible, then you can just use a different way of securing the yarn. So go in that stitch to secure the yarn, and while you have the tail on the needle, simply hide it. I won't do it right now just to save time. And let's take another look at this seam. So I made it on the swatches worked in stockinette stitch, so you could see that it is kind of invisible, but this seam works for any other stitch pattern. I tried to work with the seed stitch, and it looks great, so I assume that it works great for any other stitch pattern, and that's the seam I'm going to use from now on to join the slip stitch edgings. What a lovely seam, right? It is perfect for joining slip stitch edgings. But that's not all. I tested it to see how it works for joining two bind-off edges like we do when we make a shoulder seam, for example. And it works pretty good. The seam is flat and secure with a lovely band of stitches at the back of the work. To read this tutorial as a set of step-by-step photo instructions, follow the link in the description. To download it as a PDF, join the club or our community on Patreon. Thank you for watching this video and have a wonderful week. I'll see you in the next tutorial.